welcome to No Broken Legs. I am your host, Evan Belfiore, and joining me today to talk about a division that we probably wouldn't have cared about until 2 months ago is Jimmy Champ. Jimmy, welcome on this Labor Day.
Hey, man, no place I'd rather be. Just want to give a quick shout out to all the unions out there that made this day off possible for so many people. So I can't wait to spend it talking some football with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Labor Day, the 2-day weekend, the 40-hour work week, benefits, higher pay, all brought to you by unions and, socialist labor parties. Just remember that. I'll get off my soapbox now. Let's talk about the NFC South, Jimmy, because 2 months ago, this podcast probably would have been about 15, 20 minutes, just like most of the other divisions. But I think we'll probably spend a little more time today because Baker Mayfield got traded to the Carolina Panthers, if you heard.
Yeah, it's been in the news here in Cleveland a little bit.
So we're going to start with the Carolina Panthers, even though they're clearly not the favorites to win this division. Tampa Bay is. We'll get to them next. But with Baker Mayfield going to Carolina, it's the obvious place to start. Their over-under sits at 6.5. Over is minus 106. Under is minus 105. So pretty even action on that total. To win the division, they're plus 1,100. To win the conference, plus 7,000, plus 13,000 for the Super Bowl. To make the playoffs, no is minus 350. Yes is plus 400. Jimmy, we'll get to the Baker stuff here in a second, but let's answer the question we ask of all teams. Do the Carolina Panthers win more or less than 6.5 games?
So I project the Panthers out at 9 wins. I think they're going to lose out on a tiebreaker with the 49ers for the last playoff spot. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I do think they're going to go over. I'm going to hammer this. I think this team, if Baker Mayfield is healthy, I think this team is going to be much, much better than they were last year. And whether we like it or not in Cleveland, some people do, some people don't. There's revisionist history, whatever. When Baker has a chip on his shoulder and plays pissed off, he tends to play well. I think they've got weapons around him to succeed. The offensive line, they made improvements all over it. I think this team's going to be pretty good. I think they're going to get to 9 wins. I think they're going to just miss out on the playoffs, and I think Baker's probably going to win Comeback Player of the Year.
Yeah, let's hold that thought. I'll give my answer to the question. I think Carolina goes over during the offseason if Sam Darnold ended up getting hurt. But if they were starting the season with Sam Darnold as the quarterback, I would have them under. This line
absolutely
did not move after the trade, which I found interesting and I think gives good value. They won 5 games last year with Sam Darnold was statistically the worst quarterback. He wasn't even the worst quarterback in the league. He was ranked in the 40s. And for those of you scoring at home, there's only 32 teams, which means about a dozen teams had backups that played better than Sam Darnold did last year.
Yeah.
And the defense, that defense was just awful last year.
Yeah, and they've got guys back from injury. They had guys still not playing due to COVID. They had a lot of problems on defense, but they've got guys coming back. They look like a totally different team than what they looked at at the start of last year. I think the line didn't move because I think the sharps in Vegas and everyone around the league, I don't think anybody really has any idea how hurt Baker Mayfield was last year, what his odds of are being healthy. Nobody really understands. Nobody knows. Nobody trusts what the Browns were saying. Nobody trusts what Baker was saying. And it's really just going to be he's going to have to prove he's back to being the quarterback he was 2 years ago.
I agree, and that's a great lead-in to let's just talk about what happened with Baker Mayfield. The 4 years he was here in Cleveland, the Browns were more competitive than they had been since before I was in high school, which was before the move. They won more games over his 4-year stretch than they did pretty much for the previous decade combined. They were an absolute clown show for years, and Baker Mayfield pulled them out of that muck. And we argued with some people in some Cleveland sports groups that asked the question, is Baker Mayfield a bust? The simple fact that he won enough games as a quarterback and was good enough to make them take down that fucking jersey in downtown Cleveland with all the names on it, that in and of itself, I think, keeps him from being a bust. I think the way his tenure ended in Cleveland We talked a little bit about the Kevin Stefanski thing where he skipped the meeting, and that seemed to be the start of friction between Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski, which, if that's the case, I'm more worried about Kevin Stefanski for that than Baker Mayfield, because he wanted the head of the offense in the meeting after they got their asses kicked and didn't do anything right. He was ready to take it. He was ready to go through it and try and do better. And his coach wasn't there. And I can understand Baker's frustration, even if he didn't express that in the best way. We asked the question last year a lot, why is Baker Mayfield on the field? We've talked a little bit about how the medical staff wanted these guys to be tougher. We covered in last year's podcast a lot about our curiosity of why Baker Mayfield was on the field and why Stefanski was throwing so many passes with Baker in there. At this point, it's sort of moot whether he did that on purpose. What we know is the Browns were going to tell Baker Mayfield if they were going to go talk to another quarterback. Baker Mayfield found out through the press that they went down to talk to Deshaun Watson because apparently Barry just couldn't make a 2-minute phone call while they were heading down there. So they get denied by Watson. Baker requests a trade in response to that report coming out. And then to me, it seemed like the Browns panicked and went after Deshaun Watson. And then we just got this couple of months where they just really struggled to trade Baker Mayfield. Do you think he wound up in a good spot?
Yes. I do think he ended up in a good spot. Run CMC, a.k.a. Derry Sanders, Mr. Christian McCaffrey appears to be healthy and ready to go. They signed Deonta
We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, true. But they did sign Deonta Foreman. I still like Chuba Hubbard from last year's draft. I've been a DJ Moore guy. This, whether he likes it or not, this is the best quarterback Robbie Anderson's ever played with. And even though when any other quarterback has thrown him the ball, he's just a guy, for whatever reason, Rashard Higgins catches footballs from Baker Mayfield very well. So they signed Higgins as well. I think it's a good spot because Matt Rule at this point is probably trying to save his job. I don't think Matt Rule is in a situation like Kevin Stefanski was in, where Stefanski has the full backing of the organization to make any decision he wants. And they really do feel like in Cleveland, their roster was a quarterback away from the Super Bowl. We didn't feel that way, but that's what the organization feels, and that's fine. Matt Rule is trying to right the ship and save his job. And as bad off as the ship is in Carolina, it ain't as bad off in the one that Baker steadied in Cleveland.
Yeah, so, there's just no... I struggle to come up with words to describe how painful it was to be a Browns fan for a long time and how Baker really changed that. Even if they weren't contending for titles, just getting out of the fucking gutter was something that this franchise needed to do. And to see them jump right back into Watson and jump into the clown show, it's probably better that Baker's in a new spot, because when he doesn't have the faith of his organization and coaching staff, you can tell that he disconnects. And I think because of all the reasons you just gave, that can't happen in Carolina, because if Matt Rule lets petty shit get in the way, he's going to be out of a job.
Right. I completely agree with that. And I still contend that I think Baker Mayfield would have handled it completely differently if they would have just made that 2-minute call. Hey, you've had a rough year. We're not sure what the future is with you. We're going to go after Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
I don't blame any team when they saw the mess the Browns had created for themselves. I don't blame any team for not willing to take a trade for Baker, because the Panthers were able to get a hell of a deal for him in the end. I can't. It didn't seem like this was going to be a front office to get caught in a situation like this, like we've had year after year in Cleveland, and it's happened. And now I definitely think this is a big-time prove-it year for Baker Mayfield. Can he stay healthy? He's been beat up now. Can he stay healthy? Can he succeed? You're in a easier division. You're in an easier conference. You're not playing superstar quarterbacks to be compared to every week. I think there's a path for early, quick success for the Panthers and to be able to turn it around, because I do believe whenever Brady retires, I think that Buccaneers organization is going to falter a little bit, you may have a chance in a couple years to be a division winner. I think the pieces are there. It's in place, but we'll see. I think this year probably, I don't think you can use last year to answer the question, is Baker a bust or not? Because I agree with you. What he's done to me proves he wasn't a bust. I understand some people want to see more of it on the field. And I think if you go to Carolina and do the same things you did in Cleveland, then it proves you were not a bust.
Yeah, if he leads this team to the playoffs like you think they're going to be in contention for, or even if he just gets them into contention, I think they go over, but I'm looking at them more 7-8, not quite to 9. You mentioned comeback player of the year. He's +2, or he's +1,000. You can find it as high as 2,000. That's what FanDuel has it at now. Their odds are ridiculous right now. They've got a lot of really high odds, which is they're probably trying to entice bettors to their site. So we'll tell you about those value bets out there. Christian McCaffrey is actually a little ahead of him at +900. So there is competition for that award. Also, Derrick Henry and Michael Thomas and Saquon Barkley. You also have Juju Smith-Schuster, Allen Robinson, and Travis Etienne. So it's a pretty crowded field, but if Carolina's competing for a playoff spot and Baker Mayfield's throwing around 3,500 to 4,000 yards, maybe close to 30 touchdowns with his interception number around 10, he's going to win comeback player of the year because that's what's going to happen. These awards go to quarterbacks when that happens, unless Christian McCaffrey just goes nuts. And I think that's going to be the key, I think, to Baker Mayfield's success is he hasn't really had a running back that's as much of a dual threat. I think Nick Chubb is a better running back when we think of a traditional running back, but McCaffrey does it all. He catches a lot of passes. He can do a lot of the trickier stuff that the Browns just don't seem to ever do. So having a little bit more of a dynamic, an individual dynamic player like that, I think could really help him. Really, the question for me is the O-line better? Can they just be okay? Because if they look bad early, this team's going to fall apart. And can the defense just be, just regular bad instead of awful? Because if they can get up from bottom of the league to like around 20, then I think with their schedule, this team's definitely going to compete for 9 wins.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, they reworked their offensive line in the offseason. They got a lot of guys coming back on defense. I think they're going to be it's going to be a different look. But for the comeback player of the year situation, I think there is absolutely going to be a narrative around the league of trying to be on Baker's side because of the poor taste that's been left in everyone's mouth with the Deshaun Watson situation. Now, I fully believe if the Browns wouldn't have went out and got Deshaun Watson, some other team would have done it. But it just seemed like the most Browns-est thing to do, to make a guy the highest paid player of all time, and then you miss out on 11 weeks of his first season.
Well, not only that, there was the whole, the Browns want to move on because they don't think Baker's mature enough, and then you go after somebody who a former federal judge said is a sexual predator.
Yep, and that's, we've talked about that a lot, that we didn't understand that narrative of we need a guy that's more mature, who's more adult in the room, and then you go get this, or did you just want a guy in the room who's not going to question Kevin Stefanski?
That's a good question, Jimmy.
Like
I don't know. I don't know when the tell-all books will come out in like 20 or 30 years, right around the time that we hear the Kakina story from what's his name on ESPN, Rizzo. You use the word Brownsian there, and I've mentioned before on some of our previous pods that the most Brownsian thing would be that not only does Baker lead Carolina to the playoffs this year, but that Baker obviously wins that week 1 game. That would be Brownsian. And he wins it by getting his first, 2-minute drill in the fourth quarter comeback win.
Yeah.
Like that would be the most Brownsian, is that they score a touchdown to take the lead with like 10 seconds left or something. And man, Baker Mayfield could be looking at some big paydays coming up. People made fun of Kirk Cousins, who I think Baker's sort of in that tier
Yep.
of.
So that's where he is. 100%.
And Washington franchised him twice, and then I think he's been paid the most guaranteed money before this offseason. Obviously, I think Watson's going to make more over the course of time, but I think at this moment in time, no quarterback has ever been paid more guaranteed money than Kirk Cousins, which is pretty amazing that he beat out Sam Bradford, who made a ton of money never playing. But Baker could find himself in that situation where Carolina has a decision to make. If he makes them competitive, Matt Rule's going to have to give him another year.
Yes.
Their rookie hasn't really showed a whole lot. Plus, he got hurt.
Yep.
Do you have any final thoughts on Carolina, maybe as a whole? Do you think Matt Rule survives this season? Do you think Baker saves him?
Yeah, I do, because like I said, I really think they're going to get to 9 wins, and I have them projected to start the season at 4-0. Maybe they lose to the Saints, but I'm way down on the Cardinals. But I think they're going to go 4-0 to start the season. Then I think they're going to drop 3, win another one, lose another one, and then go on another 4-game winning streak.
San Francisco, Rams, Tampa stretch that's tough.
Yeah. I think they're going to go 4-0 and then 0-3, beat Atlanta, lose to Baltimore, and then win the next 4. And we know when Baker is hot and the team is playing well, man, he elevates everybody around him, including himself, including his coaching staff. And I think it's going to be a really good year in Carolina. I think they're going to steady the ship with Baker. But it does depend on exactly what you said. How rebuilt is the offensive line? Is the defense better than they were a year ago? Those things are going to matter. But I still think offensively, I think they're going to put up points. I think they're going to move the ball. I think they're going to be they're not going to be like a bottom 10 team in the league. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And also, you mentioned those first 4 games, probably going to get pretty good odds because people don't think Carolina is very good. If they do, let's say they just go 3-1 those first 4 weeks, you're probably going to get better odds for those next 3 games that are tough. And then you've got on the backside of that, maybe people are down on them. These are the ups and downs to pay attention to as the season goes on. Just a reminder, we talked about this in our AFC East podcast. The New England Patriots should be a roller coaster because their schedule's tough, and then it gets really easy, and then it gets tough again. So these are the little things to look out for when you're placing your bets. You might be able to get a little bit better odds, so keep an eye out for those things. Jimmy, we both think Carolina is going to be all right. We do not think they're going to compete for the division necessarily because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, despite their best efforts and a new coach, still have Tom Brady. Their over-under sits at 11.5. The over is plus 125. The under is minus 135. To win the division, they're minus 230. To go to the Super Bowl, they're plus 425. To win the Super Bowl, they're plus 900. They are one of the favorites. Minus 500 to make the playoffs, plus 460 to miss. Jimmy, do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win more or less than 11.5 games?
I project the Buccaneers out at 15 wins. I have them losing in the NFC Championship game to the Rams. So I'd be comfortable making every bet up to the Super Bowl if you think they can get past the Rams, because I think this is one of the more put-together teams if Tom Brady is okay. Like, this could be weird for Tom Brady playing a season where Giselle's not in the box every game and doesn't have his back. It could be different for him because he really does seem to be dealing with some real-life marriage shit outside of football. So it'll be interesting to see how that is, because we know Brady's always been given so much credit for being ultra focused, ultra attentive, all the details. Can you do that if your marriage might be falling apart because you're in your 40s and you won't retire? I don't know. I don't know. I think there's probably going to be even more Leonard Fournette this year. I think Lenny's going to get the ball even more. I don't know if Julio has anything left in the tank, but if he wants to cement a legacy, now would be a year to do that. They've got 5 really good wide receivers. Losing Gronk is going to hurt, but their defense is really, really good. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. The offense doesn't have to score a ton of points for this team to be really good in a bad NFC, because they have superstars at all 3 levels with depth at all 3 levels. I think this is one of the 4 best teams in the league. with Brady
Wow.
healthy. I think this team is really good. I think they're going to run through the NFC. I think this is one of the better teams in the league, and they have a chance. Brady does have a chance to go back to one more Super Bowl if he can get past the Rams in the playoffs.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you because I think they go under, and I like it when we disagree.
Yeah,
That's what it makes
absolutely.
it fun. I was shocked to see that they won 13 games last year, and I realized Brady had a great season. I drafted him in our draft yesterday for fantasy. I'm just the division. What was I saying? Their division isn't that good. Their schedule's pretty tough. They get the NFC West and they get the AFC North along with Green Bay and Dallas. I think they only get to 10 or 11. I don't think they get over 11 and a half. I still think they win the division because they're just so good. Their defense is really good, but all the things you brought up, you have a new coach in there that I mean, maybe Bruce Arians was a problem in the locker room and that's going to get straightened out. And if it does, then they're probably going to go over. I'm also the whole Brady going to Miami thing. I don't know how that's playing in the locker room, but he came out and he can probably just flash his rings and those guys are going to fall in line because
Yeah,
he's taken them there before.
yeah,
I'm not sure losing Gronk matters because this receiving core is so good. Mike Evans is a beast. Godwin should be back from his injury. He should be great. And if Julio Jones only makes 3 to 5 catches a game, if he's sort of in that third role like we saw OBJ in for the Rams, then I think he can probably find a little more than he's shown the last couple of years. This team is good. They're probably going to make the NFC Championship game. I don't think they can get past the Rams. I think the Rams are clearly better than everybody else in the NFC, but we'll talk more about the Rams when we do the NFC West. I I like a lot of the under bets for Tampa Bay. Now, I do say that with a caveat. I'm betting the under, but I'm also looking at their Carolina, Atlanta last 2 weeks of the season. I've talked about some other teams like this where I took one way over under and see that they have easy games at the end of the schedule. So you can turn around and bet those, even if, you can bet those as a hedge against your season long bet and take care of yourself both ways.
yeah. I do love.
Oh, the offensive line issues. I'm also a little worried about the offensive line.
Yeah, I do love. I love that Todd Bowles, you know, is back as a head coach in the league. He deserves it. I think you'll probably see, good or bad, I think you'll probably see Mr. Leftwich have more control of the offense and the offensive scheme than he has in the past. I do love Tampa Bay went out and drafted the best pass catching running back that was available in the draft. I think that was really smart because we know Tom Brady loves throwing the ball to running backs when they can catch the ball. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how things play out. And I agree with you. I think everything you said makes sense, but I think Tom Brady's going to will this team to enough points that the defense will be able to get wins. I really do. I think they play a tough schedule, but I think they're better than most of the teams they play on those tough schedules.
That's fair. I also think minus 230 for the division is stealing. That's like the Bills line.
Oh,
I was surprised that wasn't closer to plus or minus 4 to 500 somewhere around there. It
yeah.
just blew my mind. Especially when the next team we're talking about, the New Orleans Saints for the division, are plus 325. I just don't get those odds. The Saints over-under sits at 8.5, minus 110 for the over, plus 110 for the under. To win the division, as I said, plus 325. Conference 2,000, Super Bowl 4,000. Make the playoffs, yes, plus 125. No, minus 125. Jimmy, do you think the Saints win more or less than 8.5 games?
I project them at 9 games. So I'm going to take the over because I feel like I have a good vibe about this team. Now, I will say it does hinge on Jameis Winston's health because the last time I looked a couple weeks ago, Andy Dalton was still there as the backup, and that doesn't really work well. I think this may be a team that actually benefits, and it's a weird thing to say, but I think they may benefit from losing a Hall of Fame head coach. I think Sean Payton was getting bored I think he was getting unattached a little bit. There's no other way for me to explain the Taysom Hill nonsense. I think Dennis Allen is going to take this very seriously. I think they have one of the better defenses in the league. I think this team can be really good. They've got weapons all over the field. When you've given Jameis weapons to throw the ball to and time to throw it, Jameis has been a top 10 quarterback in this league. I think he'll get back to that. Not having Kamara to start the year is going to be a hurt for them. But what does Michael Thomas look like? That's also going to give them growing pains, I think, early in the year. But I like the Saints roster. If the Saints ended up like getting to 11 or 12 wins, I wouldn't be surprised. I like the roster that much. Jameis is just always that wild card. Is there going to be a game where he throws 6 interceptions and loses one they shouldn't? It's always possible. But I like the roster construction. I think this team could be really good. I really believe that.
Wow. I'm taking the under. I don't believe in Jameis as a winning quarterback. I also think losing Sean Payton has to matter. He is such a good coach. Dennis Allen's record as a head coach is abysmal. Those are with some really bad teams. So I'm willing to give him an opportunity to prove me wrong. And if this team ends up playing really well, then he will. They went 4-2 in the division last season. I don't think they get that high. I think they're going to be 3-3. I think they go 1-3 against the AFC North. So you've knocked 10 games out of their schedule. I've only got them at 4 wins there. Maybe they pick up 2 in the NFC North. That gets them to 6. That's 6-8 with those games. That only gives them 3 games to get over 8.5. So I just don't see it happening. It's not that their schedule's that onerous. I look at what they did last year, and I think they're going to fall off because I just think Sean Payton's a really good coach. I think that matters. And I think without Payton, Jameis gets back to his turnover ways. And I don't think it'll ever be as bad as the one season when he was with Bruce Arians and they were just saying chuck it all over the place. He'll be more restrained than that. But I think they're going to put up a fair number of points. But I don't really know what this team's doing, Jimmy. I think they're going to be treading water. And I don't know if Dennis Allen is still going to be the coach of this team next year.
Wow. I like it when we look at a team completely different like that. No, I think the roster is good. I think there's a lot of good young talent on the team. I think Dennis Allen, like I said, I think it's going to be a little bit more serious. I think it's not going to be as laid back. I do believe Sean Payton was bored coaching the Saints. That's the only explanation I can come up in my mind for the Taysom Hill nonsense. And I think this team's going to be really good.
All right. Well, we'll get to argue about that all year.
We will. Especially early, because I have them beating some teams early that you're going to have them losing to. So
yeah. The last team in this division is the Atlanta Falcons. Their over-under sits at 4.5. You can get the under at -105. The over is -115. Conference champion or win the division plus 3,200, plus 10,000 for the conference, plus 25,000 for the Super Bowl. No to make the playoffs is -1,115, meaning you have to put $1,100 up to win 100, and they are plus 700. Yes. I've said before that I think this is going to be the worst team in football. Jimmy, I'm obviously taking the under. Will the Atlanta Falcons win more or less than 4.5 games?
No, this team will be tied. They will be in a 3-way tie as the second worst team in the NFL with 2 wins. I project them at 2 wins. I think it's going to be horrible. Hopefully this will be the last year of the Arthur Smith nonsense. Hopefully the Falcons will get rid of them after they're horrible this year. I can't believe they're really going into this year with Cordero Patterson as their main running back. I can't believe it. I can't believe they're going into the season.
The first thing you mentioned about being surprised about is that he's their starting running back and not the person I'm guessing you're going to mention next.
I can't believe who they're starting at quarterback.
What the fuck is going on with Marcus Mariota? What are they thinking?
I don't understand any of this. I think Kyle Pitts is going to catch 100 balls within a yard of the line of scrimmage. I don't I'm so confused by what this team is doing. Their roster looks so bad up and down it. Now, I will say Ritter, the rookie, looked pretty good in the preseason, but you can't start him behind that offensive line with the lack of weapons they have. I think this team is bad. I think they're one of the four worst teams in the NFL. I think they're going to lose every game in conference. I do think they'll sneak 2 wins. I got them projected to win 2 wins somewhere. But I think this team is really bad. I think it's going to be a really bad year for the Atlanta Falcons. Hopefully, after this year, they'll fire Arthur Smith and they'll hire someone actually qualified to be the head coach of an NFL football team and start to right the ship there in Atlanta.
They won 7 games last year with Matt Ryan, who I didn't think Matt Ryan wasn't bad last year. He was fine. He was just fine. This team stinks. But Matt Ryan is significantly better than Marcus Mariota. And oh, by the way, do you know what the Falcons plus minus was last year, Jimmy?
What was it?
They were minus 146.
I believe it.
That's really, really bad. So good luck to you Atlanta fans because you're going to need it. Another interesting stat out there. How many passes do you think Marcus Mariota has thrown the last 2 seasons?
20?
Pretty close. 30. He threw 2 passes last year. And he was on the field quite a bit because they ran almost all their fourth down stuff with him. And the year before, he threw 28 passes. He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He doesn't have the arm strength. He's never had the arm strength. I don't really know what's going. This could just get really ugly. Like this team could possibly go winless. Like I think it's in play. I think they win 1 or 2, maybe even 3. But if defenses are, we saw defenses last season sort of strike back against the offenses after a couple of years where the offensive numbers just kept getting better and better. And I think a big part of that is defenses have now learned how to counter guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and defenses are just faster and they're playing with, they know what they're up against. So it almost seems like it's forcing teams to play better team defense. And that just has an effect, man. When you're geared up to play Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Alexander and Joe Burrow and Tom Brady and these guys that just find ways to pick you apart, and then you play against Marcus Mariota, it's like going from a tough sports shot to going on a 10-to-10 wall. It just, everything becomes easy. You have a bigger margin for error, and Marcus Mariota is just not, he's just not that guy. This team looks like they're tanking. I think they want to get one of the quarterbacks that comes out next year, and I think they're going to be very successful in that endeavor because I think they're going to have a top 3 pick.
Yeah, and I think if they get a quarterback that can throw the ball downfield, I think Drake London is going to be a great wide receiver in the NFL, but I just don't think Mariota will be able to use his skill set. I just don't believe it.
Yeah, I also like Kyle Pitts. Poor Kyle Pitts. Maybe he'll get to play with a really good quarterback before.
I think you're going to see a ton of tight end screens for that boy.
Any final thoughts here on the NFC South?
No, I'm excited. I think, like I said, I think the Saints, Panthers, and Buccaneers are all going to have plus seasons. I think all 3 teams are going to be good. I think the division games are going to be close. And I'm just curious, but I think this is legitimately a division where if the Panthers and Saints underperform what I think they're going to do, and the Falcons perform how I think they're going to do, this could be a division with 3 new head coaches next year.
Yeah, that is definitely in play and probably would be favored because people don't have a lot of faith in these other 3 teams. The Saints everybody seems to have more faith in the Saints than I do at all times. And the Saints are one of those teams for me, man, that I feel like on a week-to-week basis, whenever I think they're zigging, they're zagging, and whenever I think they're zagging, they're zigging. So I've been wrong on the Saints a lot. I hope I'm right on them this year because if the Saints are better, I think it'll be tough for Carolina to improve as much as we think they're going to. I would like to see Baker play well this year. I think he's an above-average quarterback with the potential to be a top 10 quarterback, and I think you've already heard a lot of the guys on that team talk about how much he wants to win, and I'm not sure they've played with guys that are that way because they're Carolina and they usually stink.
Yep.
That's probably enough for the NFC South. We
No, I would agree.
have the NFC West, which is our last division to talk about. We'll have that coming out later this week before the games start on Thursday. Jimmy, thank you for joining me.
No place I'd rather be, brother.
And we would like to thank all of you for listening. Please give us a like or subscribe to this channel so that you can get our weekly picks pod. For Jimmy Champ, I am Evan Belfiore, and we are no broken legs.